So here's the thing. For a while now, I've wanted to make more videos. There's been a couple problems with that though. Number one, I procrastinate a lot. Number two, I'm really bad at being on this side of the camera. So I'm hoping that the more of these I do, the better I get at being on this side of the camera, and I can hopefully provide you with some content you'll enjoy or be able to learn from. Now, I can't promise the same energy between every video. I'll try my hardest, but some days I just might not be feeling it at all, and it might be a little bit more slow paced. Some days I might be super energetic and drink 3 coffees and be able to come to you with a bunch of energy. No matter what, either way, I'm still going to try my best to keep creating content so I can keep sharing the videos with you. You know, some of these will be Photoshop videos, some will be Lightroom videos, some will be just photography videos, techniques, lessons, tutorials, whatever. You know, some will just be random videos, you know, maybe answering questions that I get asked by you guys, or it could be just talking about art. But I'm gonna do my best to keep creating content, keep sharing videos. So this first one, I would like to go over a question that I get asked quite a bit, and that is which cameras I use and why I choose to use which cameras for different situations. You know, what's the reason for that? So the first camera that I want to go over, and I'm not going to go like in extreme detail about all of these cameras, but the first camera is a Minolta X700. It's a 35mm film camera. It was released in 1981. I got it in 2006. I actually got it from my stepdad. You know, it was his old camera. He gave it to me when I wanted to do this film class at high school. You know, I was like getting kind of interested in taking pictures, and I liked art, so I figured, you know, take this photography class. I figured that would be really fun. So he gave me this camera to use, and I still use it to this day. It's one of my favorite cameras to use. I mostly shoot with this 50mm 1.7 lens, one of my favorite lenses for sure. And the camera just feels really great in the hands. You know, it feels really great in my hands. I've got some of my favorite pictures on film with this camera. It's really easy to use. It's got a great little auto mode. I don't really use the auto mode too much because I'm always shooting different scenes and I want to shoot them the way that I want to shoot them rather than how the camera sees it. But it is a really good auto mode. Another film camera that I shoot with is this Mamiya 645. It's actually the M645. I shoot mostly 120 medium format film on this. I actually just got this 45mm lens. It's a 45mm 2.8, but I mostly shoot with the 80 2.8. And there's really not much to say about this camera. I mean, there's a whole lot to say about this camera, but without making this video like super long, I'm not gonna go into all the details about it. But I really love this camera. I love shooting medium format film. There's something about the look to not only just film, but medium format film that is just, you know, you can't duplicate that digitally. You can get close, it's just never really gonna be exact. So I do love this camera. I actually am working on this camera right now to adjust some focus issues. So that's kind of a pain. That's kind of where like digital is nicer than film sometimes, because you can shoot all you want and you don't have the same kind of issues with, you know, that you have with film. But I love shooting film. You know, like I said, I learn on film, so I'm always going to enjoy shooting on film. So, and I get asked a lot, why do I shoot digital and film? Why don't I just pick one or the other? Like I said, film has its own quality, its own look, and it helps you slow down a little bit. And there's like more of a hands-on. The hands-on feeling is just great, you know, being able to load the film, and if you process at home, which sometimes I do, sometimes I send it out to different labs, but black and white I always process at home because it's super easy to process. That's really the reason, you know, it just slows me down. There's a little bit of a different feel and look to it. It's more like it's creating memories in such a different way than digital is. You know, you have these memories you can actually hold in your hand in a different way. I love digital. Of course, I shoot most of my work in digital because it's so much more forgiving than film is, and you can shoot a whole lot more because you can get multiple memory cards, and memory cards can hold so many pictures now. So it's nice to be able to document big areas that, you know, you want to take tons of pictures of, and film is really expensive, and digital you can just format and keep shooting and then put them on the computer, format, keep shooting. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to digital that film doesn't have, but there's also those qualities of film that digital does not have, and just I don't think we'll ever be able to have. So another camera that I want to go over is this Olympus E3. This was my first digital SLR camera. I got it in 2007. It was released in 2006. At the time, it was a great camera, 10 megapixels and this extremely rugged body. This thing has been through so much. It has been through snow and ice and rain and dirt and being dropped, and it's still going to this day. It's been left in a hot car all summer long, all winter long, and still just continues going. You know, every now and then I'll bring it on a trip, I'll just toss it in my backpack and I'll just have it there because I have this 40 to 150 lens on it, which you know, has quite a bit of zoom to it, and it's just a nice little camera to pop up and take some photos with. Some of my favorite photos and some of my most popular photos were shot on this camera. So it just kind of goes to show it really doesn't matter, you know, whether it's this camera or a super fancy camera. If the lighting is right, if the scene is right, it's gonna be a good picture. This thing is great, and you could probably pick one up now for a couple $100 or something. Another camera that I actually can't show you because I'm recording this video on it is the Sony A7r Iii, which is a phenomenal camera, incredible dynamic range, good color, but you know, Sony has their color issue with the green cast and whatnot, but that's fine. It can be fixed, you know, when you're shooting raw, and it produces phenomenal images. It is a 42 megapixel camera, which is awesome to have. It's totally not necessary, but for me, certain client work that I do does make it necessary, and then other things that I shoot, it's really nice to have that ability to crop further in. Ultimately, no, 42 megapixels is not necessary for large printing. You can be completely fine with 24 megapixels. But yeah, there's this whole megapixel argument with a lot of people on the internet. They're just like, more megapixels means more better, right? Totally does not mean it's better just because it's more megapixels. In fact, you're getting lesser high ISO performance when you're adding more megapixels because there's more pixels for it to process data in. So, and it depends on the camera model and all that stuff, but ultimately it's a trade-off. Higher megapixels, great for a couple things like cropping and certain client work in my case, and I'm sure other things in other people's cases. But ultimately, yeah, I still love the Sony, I still shoot with it, even though I did just recently get a new camera. And this is the camera that I just got. So I just got a Nikon Z62, and that was like one of the first questions that I got from a few people was, why are you downgrading to 24 megapixels when you have a 42 megapixel A7r Iii? And there's a couple things about that. I don't see it as a downgrade. It's just less megapixels. I can still print like a 100-inch wide print from a 24 megapixel file. I mean, that's fine. You know, I can still print huge. The common misconception that people get is, even though, you know, if you print like from a 10 megapixel camera, let's say, and you print a 200-inch wide print, yeah, if you go up to it like and stand right in front of it, you'll be able to see the little pixelation around, you know, the image quality loss. But if you step back where you're actually supposed to view it from, you're not going to notice that. It's an argument that could go on forever. There are so many other benefits to this camera. Just to name a few, it has in-camera focus stacking ability, where it'll automatically, you know, focus your focus stacking images. That's a whole conversation for another video, but that's a great little feature that it has. The Z lenses are some of the sharpest and best lenses that I have ever shot with on any camera. That is really one of the main reasons that I got this camera in the first place. And the camera itself just feels nice and rugged, and it has way better weather sealing than the Sony cameras. In addition to those things, the higher ISO low light capability of this is so much nicer than the A7r Iii, and the color is way better. And I haven't really fully tested it out yet, but I think that the Z62 has way better dynamic range. Well, not way better, but at least a little bit better dynamic range than the A7r Iii does. And you know, when it comes to dynamic range and stuff like that, that's a conversation for a whole nother video as well. Anyway, the final camera that I want to go over is a little bit different than the others, and it is this little Sony right here. This is the Sony Alpha Nex 7. This is a camera that was released in 2011, and it is also a 24 megapixel camera. And this camera is phenomenal and was incredibly well received when it came out. It was still in the earlier time of mirrorless cameras. The first mirrorless camera was actually released in 2008, I believe. Yeah, so just a few years later, this one was released with the ability to have its ISO range from 100 to 16,000 and still produce like pretty well usable images. Was insane at the time, and it still holds up to this day in 2022. I mean, I still use it. So I actually ended up getting this for a few $100s. Actually, I think less. I think it was like 200 or so, which is like $1,000 less than when it came out. I got it with the lens and everything. So yeah, when this camera came out, it was $1,200 with this 18 to 55 kit lens. So really quick, because I know there will be a comment about my shirt changing. When I was recording the other part of this video, I actually had to go to bed because it was getting pretty late and I was going to be waking up really early. My friend and I were going to go search out fog and hopefully get a good sunrise. We ended up not getting, you know, the most incredible sunrise, but we got some really awesome fog, which in turn made the sunrise pretty amazing because we had the light beams coming through the trees and it was really cool. I'm going to try to edit those pictures soon so I can post some of those photos. Anyway, we were talking about the Sony Nex 7. Well, what happened after Sony released this, just a year after Sony released this, Hasselblad wanted to collaborate with Sony on a camera. And that camera ended up actually being the exact same camera spec-wise. The only difference was Hasselblad built a new body for the camera and I think improved the menu system or made a whole new menu system. So anyway, they rebuilt the body of this camera and whatnot, and they called it the Lunar. And the Lunar shipped in 2013 and was sold for $7,000 for essentially the exact same camera. It even shipped with the same 18 to 55 kit lens that this has, the exact same one. So spec-wise and lens-wise, it was entirely the same as this Nex 7, which was at the time $1,200 with the lens. So what Hasselblad did was essentially charge $6,000 more for the exact same camera, plus a new body, which included things like little rubies and stuff on it. However, when people started receiving this camera, they started realizing how cheaply the body was actually built. It felt very cheap in people's hands, very plasticky. So really, in the end, you were just paying for the Hasselblad name and a few rubies on your camera body. More of a collection piece than an actual camera to use. But you know, good on Hasselblad for seeing that it was such a great camera, because at the time it really was, and even now it still is. To make it funnier though, the next year in 2014, Hasselblad again re-released the Lunar as a limited edition version, and this one came with a price tag of $10,000. Now, you could argue this one is a little bit more worth it because there were only 200 made, so it was like really a collector's item at that point. You know, I still can't really say I would spend $10,000 on that. Says the 32-year-old that spends a bunch of money on Pokemon cards and SpongeBob t-shirts. Anyway, it's a great camera though. I do love this camera. I think the thing that Hasselblad did was just ridiculous. I'm sure there's been numerous other instances of that happening with other camera companies. None that I know off the top of my head. I actually didn't even know that about this until I was doing more research on it. So another thing people ask me a lot is, you know, hey, what camera should I get for my first camera? I'm just trying to get into photography. I'm trying to stay on a budget of like $500 or $600. And I love to point to this camera because it is a great camera, especially if you're just starting to get into photography. This thing has so many features. Mine's converted to infrared, but I'll flash some photos on the screen that I've taken with it, and a couple that I took before it was converted for infrared. You could get this thing with a lens for a few $100s right now, and that is an amazing deal. Then you have a few $100s left over for, I don't know, memory card and tacos. Yeah, anyway, that's really all I wanted to do, just go over some of the main cameras that I use. You know, if you have any ideas or any suggestions of videos that you want to see from me in the future, I'm totally down to make whatever, or answer questions, or tell some stories, or whatever you think would be awesome that you would want to see. And anything else that I can think of in between, I'll just keep popping videos up here. Anyway, yeah, that's about it. I'm actually gonna go now and take some photos in the valley, and I'll be sharing those later as well. Thanks for watching this. Hopefully that answered some questions that you maybe had, or could help you decide on a first camera or an upgrade. for your camera system. If I can answer more questions, just, you know, leave a comment below and I'll try to answer more questions maybe in another video or however I can do that. So, all right, T. All right, goodbye.